If you've been around this channel for a while, you know that I often talk about nervous system, chronic illness, emotional regulation, and healing. Um, Today, I want to tell you a story that sits underneath of those things. Last month marked 13 years since I became a widow. 13 years. Sometimes that number feels impossible to say out loud because in many ways it honestly still feels like yesterday. And in other ways it feels like an entirely different lifetime. Welcome to Incandescent Voltage Luminous Being. My name is Tiffany, and I have been a functional medicine board certified health coach since 2017. Everything on this channel is intended for educational and reflective purposes only and is not medical advice. You are the keeper of your own current. So please seek out medical or mental health support whenever you need it. When I was a little girl, I imagined a very different future. I pictured myself married to one man for the rest of my life. I imagined a little homestead tucked away somewhere with gardens and animals and the sound of children running through the yard. I had this idea where we were going to have 7 children, 3 girls and 4 boys. And I still remember the name of the girls: Faith, Hope, and Charity. I imagined growing old beside my husband and watching the grandchildren play while we sat on a porch swing and smiled at the life that we had built together. That was a picture I had in my mind. But life had other plans. I do have 2 sons, and I love them more than words can express. And I will always treasure the few years that I was able to homeschool them. And of course, watching them grow from tiny little babies into amazing adult men. They are remarkable. But it wasn't the life I had imagined. And that has taught me something that I think many people never really put into words. Sometimes we don't just grieve a person, we grieve an entire future that died with them. When I said yes to marrying my husband, I wasn't just agreeing to a wedding. I was saying yes to 1,000 invisible tomorrows. Shared grocery lists, Saturday mornings, Christmas traditions, little inside jokes, coffee together, growing old together, arguments that would eventually make us laugh. Future vacations and retirement dreams. Tiny daily rituals that become so ordinary. You stop noticing them until they're gone. You aren't simply marrying a person. You're marrying an entire future. You're saying yes to a life that doesn't exist yet. It's a life that the 2 of you are going to create together. And one of the things that I loved most about my husband is that he made me more adventurous. I learned something about myself over the years that I can be incredibly adventurous as long as I don't have to do it alone. If he wanted to move somewhere new, let's pack. Let's do it. If he wanted to try something unusual, let's go. He once became fascinated with alpacas and eventually started dreaming about retiring in the mountains of Chile. And somehow I found myself saying, sure, why not? I was even imagining living in a yurt with him. Me, the woman who doesn't even like camping. I had never once imagined a yurt, but here we were with a whole new dream. And it wasn't really about the yurt. It was about who I would be sharing the yurt with. We already moved to Texas from Minnesota for his work, so why not Chile? Why not the mountains? Why not another adventure? It wasn't about the location. It was about him, because the location wasn't home. He was. One day in July of 2013, he collapsed. There was no warning. It was just, he was suddenly gone. And in a single moment, I lost my best friend, my confidant, my safe place, the person I wanted to tell everything to, every funny story at the end of the day, the person who made adventures feel exciting instead of frightening, the person who made ordinary Tuesdays feel meaningful. But I also lost every future conversation we would never have, every trip we would never take, every grandchild we would never hold together, every plan, every unwritten chapter. People sometimes compare widowhood to divorce or a breakup, but for me, it wasn't anything like that. There was no choice, no closure, no next conversation. There was no possibility that we might reconnect. The book simply stopped in the middle of a sentence, and I was left holding the unfinished pages. I remember feeling like a part of me died that day too. And for a very long time, I wasn't really living. I was just surviving. My boys still needed a mother, so I stayed. I got up, I went to work, I paid the bills, I made the dinner, I kept moving. But if you had asked me what I wanted 10 years into the future, I would have had absolutely no answer, because my future disappeared. What surprised me most wasn't just the grief, it was how completely my body responded. We often separate emotional pain from physical pain as though they're different things, but our bodies do not. Within weeks, I broke out in full body hives. My skin burned and itched, and welts covered me from head to toe. I was emotionally devastated and physically miserable. There is even something out there known as broken heart syndrome. It's a very real cardiac event triggered by acute emotional trauma. Our nervous systems don't always distinguish between emotional catastrophe and physical danger. And when the person in our lives who represented safety disappears in seconds, your body knows something enormous has happened. And mine did. Looking back now through everything that I've learned about nervous system regulation, functional medicine, the emotional freedom technique, traditional Chinese medicine, I don't see those symptoms as weakness. I see them as my body desperately trying to survive what was impossible. And of course, there came the stressor that goes with widowhood. If you still have children, I became a single mother again, and I will share that in a future video. But my boys were entering puberty. My oldest was processing his own grief through intense anger, and I was exhausted and terrified and overwhelmed. So I moved back to Minnesota to be closer to family, because in my mind, that's what family is for. Of course, surely they'll help us through this. But Yeah, life rarely follows the script that we write in our minds, and the help I imagined didn't materialize. Therapy also wasn't especially helpful for me or the boys. And the grief support group in my area wouldn't even allow me to attend because I wasn't old enough. It was only for older widows and widowers. It wasn't for us young ones. What I realized was that what I didn't need was another strategy. I didn't need a worksheet. I didn't need someone trying to fix me. I needed someone willing to sit beside me while my world had fallen apart. Someone willing to simply hear me, to let me say his name, to let me tell the same stories again and again. I needed a witness, someone to witness my impossibility that I was living through, the weight that I was carrying. And instead, all I had was an overwhelming loneliness. And loneliness has a way of making every burden feel so much heavier. After a couple of years, I tried dating. People encouraged me to. They thought it would help me move on. And instead, every date became just another reminder of how deeply loved I had been. My husband never tried to make me into someone else. He never criticized me for being different. He never expected perfection. He just simply loved me. One of the sweetest habits that we had was asking each other, what can I do to make your week better? Or what can I do to take something off your plate today? Imagine living with someone who genuinely looked for ways to make your life easier, not because they had to, but because they just loved you. They weren't keeping score. Do you understand how that kind of love literally changes everything? And once you've experienced it, it becomes very, very difficult to accept less than that. Eventually, I stopped dating. Not because I'd given up on life, but because peace became more valuable than companionship that didn't feel very good. For many years, my world became very quiet. I went to work. I came home. I took care of my responsibilities. I existed. And when both of my boys became adults, an unexpected question arrived. Now what? For so many years, my purpose had simply been to keep putting one foot in front of the other until they were grown. And suddenly, they were. I found myself staring into a future I hadn't dared to imagine. I think that healing sometimes begins the moment we give ourselves permission to start dreaming again. And it's not because the grief is gone. It isn't. Not because we stop loving that person, because we don't. But somewhere inside of us, there's a tiny part of ourselves that whispers, what if there's still another chapter? Today, I know what I long for. I dream about the mountains, Colorado, maybe New Mexico, a high desert with snow in the winter, an herb garden, berry bushes, fruit trees, a library filled with books, a fireplace, sunlight pouring through enormous windows, a stream nearby, all of my cats getting to sleep in patches of afternoon sunlight. And maybe one day some yaks grazing in the distance. I don't know exactly how to get there. I have no idea what the steps are going to be. But for the first time, In many years, I have a tomorrow that I can imagine. And I think that, yeah, for me, I think that's a miracle. People sometimes think, they make assumptions that I choose isolation. And in some ways, they're right. My circle is extremely small, very, very small. I don't keep it small because I dislike people. I keep it small because my peace has become precious. I don't choose controlling relationships. I don't choose manipulation. I do not choose environments where people are committed to outrage instead of curiosity. I don't choose people who have no interest in emotional immaturity. Because after everything, oh gosh, after everything that my nervous system has been through and survived, I have become fiercely protective of what I allow to influence my nervous system. And it's not just people, it's movies and music, and I'm fiercely protective of my inner landscape. There is a profound difference between loneliness and discernment. I'm still learning. I'm still learning. If you're listening today because your future didn't turn out the way you imagined, I just want you to know you are not alone. Maybe your grief isn't widowhood, or maybe it's infertility or divorce or chronic illness, a dream career that never happened. Maybe it was a diagnosis that changed everything. Whatever it is, you may not just be grieving a person or an event. You may be grieving an entire future that disappeared. And that grief deserves compassion. As for me, I still miss my husband, and I suspect I always will. He remains the only person in my nearly 50 years who made me feel completely safe to be myself. And that was the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. But if 13 years has taught me anything, it's this. Healing does not mean forgetting. Sometimes healing looks like carrying your love with you into a future you never expected to have. Sometimes healing looks like planting herbs in soil you never imagined touching, or it might look like laughing again. Sometimes healing looks like making tea for one. Sometimes healing looks like daring to dream about mountains after years spent just trying to survive the valley. I really don't know where my path leads from here, but after years of simply existing, I find myself hoping again. And honestly, I think that's enough. And maybe that's what resilience really is. Not pretending that the cracks aren't there, but discovering that somehow, against all the odds, the light can still shine through the cracks. Before we close, I want to let you know that in the community tab tomorrow, I will have some reflective questions. You can use those for contemplation or journaling. If you want a deeper conversation, if you have an upcoming appointment with a therapist or a counselor, you could use those questions for that as well. And just remember, there's never any pressure to have immediate answers. Give yourself permission just to sit and give space to the questions, because sometimes it's in that space that healing can begin. Thank you for choosing to spend this time here today with me, Luminous Being. I know this is very different than what I normally do in my videos, but thank you for choosing to be here. If something in this conversation resonated with you, I would love to hear your reflections in the comments. Did anything I say today help you to see yourself, your body, or your current season of life in a different way? Maybe you were able to glean a little bit more self-awareness for yourself. Just a reminder that these conversations are not about perfection. We just want to hear ourselves more honestly and clearly with compassion. And if this episode supported you in some way, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone else who you think may need to hear these words today. And if you'd like to go deeper, I invite you to explore my free 5-day email course. It's linked in the description below. It's where ancient wisdom meets modern science to really support you on your own health, nervous system, and wellness journey. And until next time, may you continue healing at the speed of safety.